Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. My guest today is Justine Evirs. Justine is an addiction and mental health advocate, serial entrepreneur, author, and future therapist who believes in the power of raw emotion and vulnerability as the catalyst for change. Justine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yes, I so appreciate all of the experience, what I know of you, the experience you've had, and how much you have taken the reins of your life and to transform and to evolve and to overcome. And I would love to hear more about your experience with shame or with coming into troubles, challenges, trials, and difficulties, which we all do, but how you've experienced those challenges and then been able to take a different look at how you see yourself as someone who's gone through struggles and challenges, how you've worked through that, and what your perspective is about not just life, but about yourself and how you want to contribute to the world.
Yeah. Well, I think my challenges started at a very young age. I think that I didn't really know they were challenges, to be honest with you. I just thought it was normal life. And because I thought it was normal, I thought I have to be able to deal with this. And if I can't deal with this, then I'm failing. So I learned very, very early the power of silence. I learned very, very early the power of just shoving everything down, surviving, and again, being as quiet as possible. And just kind of not rocking the boat. Don't whine, don't complain, be quiet before I give you something to cry about. You know, that is the environment that I was raised in. And when you add in alcohol and drugs and abuse, physically, verbally, sexually, I think it really complicates a lot of things. And so I didn't really know that I had challenges. It felt hard, but everyone around me was telling me that life was hard and this is what life dealt you. So suck it up and get over it, because you have to find a job and pay your bills, and you have to have insurance. And, you know, if you want to make something of yourself, you have no time to complain or cry. And so I did what every teenager does. And I joined the Navy at 17 and used it as a legal way of running away from home and providing myself an opportunity. And I don't regret that. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I would not have joined the service. I wouldn't have the career that I've had. I wouldn't have the new career that I have now, believe it or not. We'll get into a little bit of that later to see how life comes full circle. I wouldn't have my husband. I wouldn't have my kids. My life would look completely different. So I don't regret that. But unfortunately, that environment fed into what I had already been taught. And so it reinforced this concept of silence. And probably until 2010, when I had my third child, I really started to struggle with postpartum depression. And it was the first time when I realized I'm not doing well. You know, I'm not really handling life on life's terms, and I'm really struggling. And so I asked for help, but I didn't ask for it in a way, I didn't communicate it very well. And I don't think the people that I was around really knew how to help me. And when I did get in front of a professional who asked me if I needed help, I didn't have the courage to say yes, because I thought I was failing if I said yes. And so things just got worse for another 10 years until I was about 34. And I decided to stop self-medicating and quit drinking. And that was 5 years ago. And so over the last 5 years, I've been slowly recovering from alcohol addiction. I've been recovering from PTSD, been recovering from bipolar. I am bipolar. Yeah, I live with bipolar. See, reframing my words are really important. I'm still learning that. And I think I've learned over time that it's not like this switch that goes off. I have to wake up every day and give myself permission to shine instead of to sit with shame. It's a decision that I make every day. And when that shame creeps in, it used to take over me. It used to happen without me even knowing. It used to happen and it just felt normal. Like, this is what happens when I feel shameful. And it wasn't until I started reading books and started getting the vocabulary and started learning, wow, this is shame, because I didn't know what it was. And then once I knew what it was, I would say over the next year, I kind of started to figure out when it was and when it wasn't. And then the next year, I kind of figured out what would trigger it. And then, over the last year, I've been working on a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and really changing the thoughts that trigger the shame. And even if I'm unsuccessful in it happening, I know once it happens, it's not true. And that takes a lot of work. A lot of work. One thing I'm very grateful for is I've always been very ambitious, to my demise, which we'll get into because I am a workaholic. But sometimes our strengths are our biggest weaknesses. So when it's overdone, when I become a workaholic, it's my weakness. But when it's in balance, it's a huge strength. And I think that resiliency has carried me through recovery, because recovery is really, really, really hard. I mean, you're rewiring your entire brain to think, act, and be a completely different way. And anybody that's in recovery or thinking about entering into recovery or thinking about shining instead of sitting in shame, it's such a big decision, because it's constant work every day, every hour, every minute, pausing, thinking it through, rewiring your brain. And it takes a lot of resilience to get through that. And I don't think we talk about how hard it is. And personally, I think that's why a lot of people choose to not do it, because it is hard. It's easier to stay stuck. It's easier, especially once you have the awareness and you have a choice. Before, when you don't realize you have a choice and you're so stuck, you don't see the choice. Once you have that awakening and that awareness and you know you have a choice, it's easier.
So many insights and wisdoms. And in terms of the idea of being stuck or being maybe afraid to take that first step on the journey of healing and self-acceptance, self-love, and awareness, I'm wondering what you think. I've had my own journey on this particular path of working through shame, and I've noticed that there has to be a willingness. At some point, you have to be willing to be honest and open and accountable with yourself. At the same time, which is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, even in that accountability and awareness, there can't be too much or any like harsh self-judgment. Maybe like judgment in the sense of, okay, let me be really clear about what my part was, or even in the smallest ways. But this idea of feeling that you will be judged, which I guess is the shame, but I wonder what you think, because I think that is a huge piece of preventing people from taking the next steps. It is uncomfortable and even painful to have to go through old experiences, old memories, painful experiences and memories. But the idea of feeling like you might be judged by others, or just having to kind of accept and acknowledge what you've gone through, even if you didn't have an active role in what you've gone through, in terms of um, being the one who brought upon something, but just the feeling of feeling like you're not worthy or that you're not good enough. I think that those are the scariest in my mind, scariest reasons and the biggest reasons why people are afraid to move forward. What do you think?
That's the reason why I wrote the book that I wrote. It's called FDIS, Permission Granted. And the reason why it's titled that is because it's like a kick in the face to shame. It's like a kick in the face to fear. And I basically share my story in the most raw, shocking way. And throughout the story, I talk to the reader and I say, don't worry, I'm going first. I'm going to share my story in the most crazy way. And I'm going to share stories that no one is talking about. And my hope is that you will go next. That is my hope for the book, is that my story is so outrageous and my experiences are so bizarre and so unique that the next person is going to say, well, I'm not that bad. So let's do it. Here's my story. Here's what I'm afraid of. Because I think, like I said, vulnerability is the antidote to fear. I think when we own it and we say we're scared and we connect with people, it lessens the effect of that fear and shame. And from the very beginning, I give out my email address in the book and I say, please, email me. We're going to go through this journey together. Don't worry. I know yet you're sitting on things that are uncomfortable that you need to release, and you can release them with me if you want, or you don't have to. You can be inspired and release them somewhere else. But at the end of the day, I just permission granted to own your story. And that's why it's titled FDIS, Permission Granted to Own Your Story, is because that's my intention, is to kind of remove that fear and shame, because there's nothing. I think the fear and the shame goes away when you're in the room with other people who have experienced what you've experienced or something worse. All of a sudden you're like, okay, this is a little easier. So that's the space that I intended to create. And I think I've been successful in that. I've sold a little over 700 books, and it's that's a lot. It's a lot in today. People are publishing books. I think it's like 80 a day in our country. It's insane. It's really hard to sell a book, and I think maybe 100 of those have reached out to me personally and shared how the book has impacted them, and that's the reason why I wrote the book. That's the reason. And some people have said it's been life-changing, life-saving, and that to me, I think, is worth my journey and the work that I put into writing it. It's funny because I finished writing it 2 years ago and it published in May. It was a little late. That's what happens when you publish a book during a pandemic and a paper shortage. But now I read it and I actually feel the shame cycle come back, because it's been 2 years and I've grown into a completely different person. And now when I read it or people say things about it to me, I feel that shame come back, because I'm not empowered by it as much as I used to be. It feels far away, and I've done a career change since then, so I'm not living in it every day. So that's been an interesting experience too, which is making me eat my own words,
Mm-hmm.
making me take my own advice, making me do that cognitive behavioral therapy in interrupting that thought, looking at the facts and saying there's really no reason for me to feel this way, because at the end of the day, I am a biracial, bisexual, alcoholic, military veteran who lives with mental illness. That is who I am. I've accepted it. And I think when we accept it, it really loses its lust, its blunder. The hit is a little softer. So I don't know. I don't know if that's resonating. That's kind of my take on it. I don't know if that is helpful.
Well, I think so. The way you started your answer was by saying, well, that's why I wrote the book I wrote, because I wanted to be the first and show people it can be done, and it doesn't really matter how painful your experiences are or were. You can do this. I
Mm-hmm.
think that people do need to know that they can make it through, and seeing someone and seeing others who have taken the journey and are on the other side, or at least are in the light, moving in that direction, that is a huge encouraging force. And so I hear what you're saying. For you, that is your contribution, or one of them anyways, in
It
this
is,
in
for
this
sure.
mm-hmm.
And I think I'm still contributing. I think that's why I'm going through a career change right now, and working as a counselor, as a substance abuse counselor, and actually will be going back to school again to be fully licensed therapist in a couple of years. So I think I'm still contributing, because you can't be a therapist and not eat your own world. You have to walk the walk, and it pushes me to grow every day, and it pushes me to live in recovery one day at a time, every single day. You can't give out that advice and can't give away what you don't have. And so it's almost my commitment to myself of, I'm in this for life. And not only am I in this life for me to live my best life, but I'm also in this to give back and bring as many people as I can with me. And I feel, I'll be 40 this year. I feel like this is what I'll do for the next 40 years if I'm lucky.
And when I said this is your contribution, to be clear, I did not mean it was a one time in one moment in time contribution. I mean, it's one of many, callings or missions, whatever words you want to use. But yes, I certainly understand that it's ever growing and evolving, and that is truly a service. I'm curious about your process when it comes to letting go of, even acknowledging outdated beliefs, maybe beliefs that you inherited from family, from the people who were in your childhood, in your environment, in your earlier parts of life. Because I think that someone who's been on a journey like you have, I can only imagine you have to come up against
Mm-hmm.
beliefs that you might have inherited about yourself, about how you see yourself in the world, about what you think or what you were told your role was, and then take a close look at those and say, wait, are those based on truth? And it can be so. I've gone through that process in my own way, and it's complicated because we love and are loyal sometimes even to our family, even if they've contributed to many of our hardships. But at the same time, so it's hard to untangle,
Hmm.
sometimes what we've inherited, and then examine it in terms of, is this true? Is this not true about myself, about how I'm supposed to think about myself? I'm wondering what that process has looked like for you. Maybe you're still in it, but to me, that seems to be a hallmark on the journey.
Yeah. And it's the hardest part, especially that family part is so difficult. I would say I was very much in it when I was writing the book 2 years ago. I would say I was very much still in it last year when it published. I would say I'm in a very different place now. Um, I find myself having a conversation with myself often of, I don't live my life like that anymore. And that no longer works for me, is something that I'm finding I'm saying to myself often. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I used to carry a little bit of shame with my growth, even. You
Mm.
know, I feel bad for growing. That's very common with people who have experienced abuse. You feel bad for leaving the pack or changing, making waves and rocking the boat. And I think once I learned that, like, oh, my reaction is actually a result of that as well. Everything about me is a result of dysfunction. And I think what's done it for me, and this is just for me, and I don't know if this will work for everybody else, but my process has been, I've noticed a pattern of people in my life that when I'm doing well, they don't want to be around me. But when I'm doing bad, they want to be around me. And so once I've kind of categorized these people, I've noticed that the people who are most around me when I'm doing not well are the ones that create the most shame for me. And so I need to make a decision to distance myself from them. And I'm going to hurt some feelings along the way because unfortunately, we say hurt people hurt people. It's true. And you just outgrow people. I mean, I think that's the simplest way to put it, but it's so painful when it's your family. You outgrow people. Um, I think you have to make a conscious decision to say, I no longer live my life like that. And I think as a result of that, we lose people that we truly, truly love along the way, but they don't fit into the life we're designing for ourselves any longer. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about, because maybe that'll be my next book. It's like, F this, permission granted to move on, because it's okay to put yourself first. And I think a lot of people, especially women, are taught to put themselves last. And we don't operate like that anymore. We really need to be putting ourselves first. Period. Trying to think of an example, all I can think about is my son right now. He has 2 guinea pigs, and for a year he has like loved these guinea pigs, and he wanted them so bad. He saved all his money and he bought these guinea pigs. He bought the cage and all the pads and toys, and he's just been, they've been the highlight of his life for a year. Well, we just moved again, and I think the amount of work it goes into moving with 2 guinea pigs and them growing up and now starting to fight all the time and needing more space. And he's about to be 14. So he cares a lot about his room and the way his room smells and the way so he's outgrowing these guinea pigs, which is shocking to me because he's been in love with them. And he made the decision, this doesn't work for me anymore, Mom. I don't want to take care of these guinea pigs anymore. And then he instantly you could just see the shame on his face. And he instantly just like broke down in tears. He's like, but I feel bad. I feel like I'm failing them. I feel like I'm giving up on them. I feel like, it's my responsibility. I bought these pets. I need to be taking care of it. I'm just not having fun anymore. It feels like a chore. And I used to have so much fun with them, and just I have different interests. So it was like this example of what it feels like to grow. And I could have been the parent that said, no, it's your responsibility. You bought these 2 guinea pigs, you're going to see it through, and that's it, and made a lesson of it. And that lesson isn't wrong. If that's what works for your family and the lesson that you're trying to instill, then, that works for you. But I think the old me would have maybe have taken that approach, but the new me took the approach of, it's okay to change your mind. You don't need to feel bad about changing your mind. You're allowed to change your mind at any time. And the good news is that this isn't a child. Like, you can't give your child back permanent things. Now, these are live animals. And this may seem very insensitive for me to say, but they're guinea pigs. They're going to be okay. Like, we're going to find a healthy home for them, and someone is going to love them and take care of them just as much as you loved them that first year. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to not find joy in it anymore. And you don't have to explain yourself. Let's work to find a new home for them. And for me, that's exactly what it feels like to outgrow people. That's exactly what it feels like to not want to be in a relationship with someone any longer, whether that's friendship, family, spouse, significant other, partner. It's what it feels like when you're going through a career change, any sort of change. And we want to automatically feel bad for making that change. And it goes back to the book, F this. No, from Insha Granite, you can change your mind. You're allowed to do that. And I don't think I was raised that way. And I don't think enough people are raising their children. I wouldn't say that. I don't know what people are doing. But I don't know if that's the norm yet.
I hear you. And I think what you're saying, I want to just go a little deeper for a moment with it. Maybe what you're really getting at the heart of is operating from a place of survival versus really thriving and feeling unfettered, feeling free to make mistakes, to grow, to learn, but acknowledging that is part of the journey and there's freedom in that evolution. Whereas I think in survival, when you're using those instincts, which are very useful instincts, we need them, we have them for a reason. But I think that when people are operating in them, even unconsciously or subconsciously, kind of day in and day out in small ways, maybe they have actual means, they have a home, they have food, but there's still this feeling of there's not enough of something, of love, of time, of opportunity, something where that's how I think of survival. There's a deficit, a belief. And so maybe that is sometimes why so many of us were raised in environments where it was it's either this or that.
Right.
You don't have a choice, in between the black and white. That's how I think about it.
No,
I don't know
you're right. That's totally right. And, these are things that therapists are taught. These are cognitive distortions. There's a name for it. And how we reverse the cognitive distortions is through cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's all the psycho mumbo jumbo. But I don't know if I think people are just starting to kind of awaken to these things. From my experience, when I lived in San Francisco, I feel like more people were awakened to them. But then leaving San Francisco, I realized how much of a bubble San Francisco was, and that most people weren't talking about fail fast and, all these different terms that we use in San Francisco. People weren't talking like that at all. People weren't talking about post-traumatic growth and fail as much as possible. People still are very afraid to fail, very afraid, very fearful of judgment. And I think there's a lot of, I'll speak from a parent point of view again. As a parent, I think there's still a lot of parents, a lot of people that I meet just out in the community and the different places that I've lived over the years. I think there's still a lot of parents that are scared to fail and are not role modeling this idea of perfection. And I think our kids are a little bit more comfortable with failing. We're not really teaching them that it's okay. And that's where that shame is coming from. If I'm not perfect, then, so maybe I'm not the expert, but maybe we could argue that a lot of that is taught very young based on our culture that we live in.